Jenny will give us about 20-30 minutes presentation, and after that we have time for questions and comments. And you can either use your microphone to comment or write to the chat box. But when you are not speaking, I kindly ask you to mute yourself to avoid echoes. But Jenny, please, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tuya. I feel highly honoured to be here. It's terrific. And I just want to say I'm going to try to talk directly to you, but the camera is not exactly where my slides are. But I'm sure you'll forgive me if I keep looking backwards and forwards. And I also just wanted to say that in uploading the slides, you can see that there's a couple of E's missing in Charles Sturt University. But as far as possible, I think that the slides are all there. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to talk about our ePortfolio in our program, something that I'm pretty proud of, and I'm proud of the work that the students do. And just before I begin, because I'm beaming in from Australia, I would like to make an acknowledgement of country. So just to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I want to pay my respects to those elders, past, present and emerging. And of course, on the border of Albury and Wodonga, I'm sitting in Wiradjuri Nation. So just want to acknowledge the people of this country. I'm beaming in from Australia. I know that Tuya's been to Australia, and maybe other people in the meeting have been to Australia as well. It's a very big country, and I just wanted to give you an idea of the size of the country compared to whereabouts some of you are. I know that some of you are not in this map, but it really is a very big continent with only 23 million people. And so we tend to be gathered around the edges fairly much, mostly on the eastern side, but there is a sprinkle over on the west and you know, a little in the north and the south. But we really do mostly keep to the eastern side, and that's where the university that I work in is based. And here is a map that shows you about Charles Sturt University. Charles Sturt University is a bit different to most of the others because we're a regional university. So you can see that we have a number of campuses that are spread out throughout New South Wales and a couple of other spots as well. Our main campus where the leadership, the Vice-Chancellor is based, is in Bathurst, and our largest campus is in Wagga Wagga. And the campus that I'm on is, if you can read Wagga Wagga on that map, you can see that below that is Albury Wodonga, and that's Albury is in New South Wales and Wodonga is in Victoria. So we're right on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. And that means that our students do come often from the country. They come from smaller regional towns. Sometimes they think that coming to university in Wagga Wagga or Albury Wodonga is coming to a bigger city because they come from a smaller, remote community. That's where mostly our face-to-face students come from, is from our local regional areas. Here are some quick stats so that you have a bit of an idea about what I'm talking about with this particular degree program. Already before the coronavirus situation, we had more than half of our students in the online space, and you can see down here that on the bottom level there that the Albury Wodonga campus has about 1,200 students who would come onto the campus to study. But they are now, of course, like most other people in the world, in the online space. So we're teaching all of our students completely online at the moment. But you can also see here that education has just over 6,000 students. So across our campuses and our degree programs, we have about 6,000 students doing Education Studies. I wanted to say that the university, it's named Charles Sturt because Charles Sturt was a European explorer who travelled across the spaces where our campuses are and mapped those areas and was a good person. He wrote lots of diaries that talked about his ambitions to be a politician and a scientist and an explorer. But in his diaries, he wrote that he wanted to work for the public good. And so this is a motto that the university has adopted, for the public good. So all of the works that we try to get our students to engage in are meant to be for the public good. And we've also adopted an Aboriginal saying, a Wiradjuri term, Yindya Marawanangana, which means, just as it says here, so that we want to create a world that's worth living in. So these two mottos are the things that drive our curriculum and our values and our reason for being, I suppose, in the communities that we are in. And I've just copied here the little blurb about the School of Education. So because we've got 6,000 students, there isn't just one School of Education. We have a School of Education and a School of Teacher Education. The School of Teacher Education is based on the Dubbo and Bathurst campuses, and the School of Education that I'm based in is on the 3 campuses of Albury, Wodonga, Wagga and Port Macquarie. So we teach the same things, but because we have so many students, we share the teaching through those 2 schools. And as I said, we have on-campus students on those 5 campuses, but we also have probably more than half of our students online, so they could be anywhere in the world. And I think David Smith, who you may know, who is our head of school, is probably the author of this paragraph from our page about the school. And it's just emphasising the fact that we work in the online space a lot, and that we are striving for high quality on-campus and blended teaching in our degrees. Okay, so a couple of decades ago, I've been at this university for quite a long time, so I've seen a change in how things have operated. And to begin with, our education degrees were quite discrete. So when I first came here, we had a Bachelor of Education Early Childhood, and we had a Bachelor of Education Primary, and we had a Bachelor of Education Secondary. And probably about 10 to 15 years ago, the decision was made that the degrees would be merged in a way that made them more valuable to the students. So they came out with a double degree, so to speak, at the end. And so the degree that I mostly teach in, I do teach in other degrees as well, but I mostly teach in the Bachelor of Education Early Childhood and Primary. So graduates from this degree can be employed at the end of their degree in the under 5 sector or in the primary school. And we have other double degrees where students study to be teachers, in primary or in secondary. So once again, having that flexible outcome at the end of their degrees. At any point, when we decided to design this new degree that was going to be early childhood and primary, there was a commitment to embedding ePortfolio. So several of the academics here had success with ePortfolios, and the value that we were finding in having them in a single course or subject was thought to be exemplified if we embedded it in the whole degree. So for quite a long time, since the advent of this early childhood and primary degree, we have embedded ePortfolio in it. Now, the degree has been revised and reviewed a number of times, and probably for the last 2 to 3 years, it's finally become stabilized in the form it is right now. And this structure is the newest form of the degree, and it does have ePortfolio embedded in it. And just at this point, I wanted to make the point, I think I said this in my abstract, that Charles Sturt University uses PebblePad as its format, its ePortfolio format. Back in 2006, when Hartnell Young was saying this about ePortfolio, really an ePortfolio was basically an electronic CV. So we'd moved from a paper version where, I guess, I presume many of us in this room have actually created these, where you have pictures of yourself working with children, you might have some lesson plans, a variety of pieces of evidence that we'd put together in a folder that we could take into an interview and, flip over the pages to prove that we had achieved certain things. And I guess the first versions of ePortfolios were electronic versions of that, like a Word document. And they were a bit more flexible because, with a piece of paper, you can't always keep updating it, week by week or month by month. But with a Word document, of course, word processing meant that you could be updating and keep your electronic resume up to date. And I mean, I keep doing that these days. So Word document, I'm sure you do too. But over time, an ePortfolio has become a more complex and interesting space. And PebblePad, the university's been using PebblePad for quite a long time, and it's been very interesting to watch them constantly improve and make more flexible their product. So now PebblePad themselves say that a portfolio is only one aspect of what they're now calling their learning space. So the ePortfolio space becomes a receptacle where these things that we might have put together in our paper folder to begin with can be gathered in an online space and made more flexible and used in a number of different ways. And so as technology improves, so does the ePortfolio space. But I wanted to make the point that, yes, in 2006, Hartnell Young was saying that the essentials of ePortfolio are these three things. And I don't think that's changed. I mean, technology, goes faster than we can keep up with. And so things are changing with the technology. But the content or what goes into an ePortfolio still must have a purpose. There must be a reason that you are asking students to create something. There must be a way for them to reflect and prove that they are becoming or have made it to being a reflective practitioner, because we know that that's what we value very highly. And it needs to be a vehicle to communicate to a viewer or a reader that a good argument is made and good evidence is provided that something has been achieved, that reason for being that purpose has been achieved. So the course, the early childhood and primary course, has to answer to a number of different bosses, I suppose, the political mechanisms that tell us what needs to go into our degree and, what kind of potential student we can invite to do our courses. So one of those institutions is the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership. And I mean, the government, and one day you might like to ask David Smith, our head of school, about all of the politics that goes into, how we actually get our courses accredited and what the accrediting bodies tell us we must and must not do. But at this stage, they're saying not only must you take students that are academically able to do this, this, and this, or achieve these scores in their secondary exams, or have had these particular life experiences, but they also have to have these, what they're calling non-academic capabilities. So these are what I would call professional skills, and every teacher should have them. And obviously, the people we have that are interested in being teachers, come to university with some degree of these skills. So they've numbered them. There's 7 there, and we get the students to think about those when they come in to our program, and we also get them to reflect on them again when they are finishing their degree. The other thing that's really important that the students, as they move through their course, is that they have to prove that they reach particular standards. So the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers are listed here, 7 of them. And of course, there's sub numbers, there's explanations of these. But notice on the right it says, refer to the standard at each career stage. So over the 4 years of the degree, we are helping students gather evidence that they've achieved these 7 standards at graduate teacher level at that career stage. And for an ePortfolio, that's really important, because if they get to the end of their 4th year and they can prove to a prospective employer that they've achieved these standards, they've got all the evidence to show that they're a graduate teacher and they're ready to take their place in the profession. And that's a point in time. The other career stages that the standards apply to are proficient teachers, highly accomplished teachers, and lead teachers. So it doesn't just stop there. The students, when they become teachers, don't stop having to prove themselves, but if they expect to advance and move higher up in the chain of what highly accomplished teachers are, then they have to prove that. So the ePortfolio becomes a really good point in time for them. They've been able to show development over the 4 years of their degree to get to the point of being a graduate teacher. And because they can actually take their ePortfolio with them when they graduate, PebblePad allow them to have an alumni account. So everything that they've got in their learning space they can take with them when they graduate. Then they can start collecting and start mounting an argument to be, at the next career stage and show the development after that to be a proficient teacher. So back to our degree, if you see the columns here that we've divided the types of learning that the students do when they're in our degree, you can see that the first one, the green column, is professional experience. And so that's when they go out and do their practice teaching, and that's when they would collect all the evidence about being ready to be a graduate teacher. So the ePortfolio is embedded in the courses or subjects that have professional experience in them. So you can see right from the very beginning when they come in first year, we start them off and we give them something to do for their ePortfolio every year, right up to the conclusion of the professional experiences. So now just a little bit of something about the ePortfolio. I mean, to begin with, as I said, it was something that some of us liked to use when it was like an electronic portfolio to put evidence of learning in just one subject. But now, if we design it to be over several years, then what I hope we end up is, at the end of this quote, that a student transitions from archiving their experiences to being able to provide a self-portrait, and that sense of self, that putting things together to show the integrity of your own work, is really important to us in this process. And in the abstract, I referred to visual image. So right in the beginning, one of the things that we learned was that asking students to either find or make a visual image about how they saw themselves as future teachers became really helpful in having them talk about themselves. So they could talk about themselves in the picture and what that meant or what that symbolized, but it also meant that they could talk about what it meant for them as future teachers. So this, oh, and I better just say that some of the examples I've got are a little bit old, because in the last iteration of embedding the ePortfolio, I was putting in the assessment task and assessing the students to make sure we had everything we wanted in those assessments. And I don't assess them anymore. So these are kind of these are students who've given me permission to use their work when they were part of the ones that I was assessing. So hence, this student, 2015. So you might think it's a little old, but and some of their ePortfolios are looking even more spectacular than the ones that I might show you tonight. This student, I thought, really did a lovely job of explaining, actually put herself into a picture, had the picture taken, and then so she'd thought about what the image was going to say about her. And I like her explanation that it represents her educational journey, that the road, represents where she's been and where she's heading. It's really quite beautiful. And then she goes on to talk about what that means about her as a near professional. So she can describe herself, by having used the image, she can describe herself more clearly, and talk about the ways that she's going to be a really good professional educator. So I did say that we start them in first year. So when the students arrive, the very first thing we do is get them to think about what they've brought to university. So that's why I said in my topic heading, from what they bring to university to becoming almost a pre-professional. And those 7 non-academic capabilities are what we ask them to think about, think what they've brought to the university, and I'll just show you that in a minute. But we also ask them to think about, find an image or make an image of themselves, what they think their future as a professional teacher will be, because they have stars in their eyes. They think they know what teaching is, and it's quite delightful to see what images they'll choose and what they'll write about being a teacher. And then it's also wonderful to see what happens when they reflect on that in fourth year. But we do ask them to think about what images say about you, so that you could have a literal image like this one, where if a person used this as an image, they might talk about the physical nurturing of young children. So an image could be literal, or it might be symbolic, as Stephanie's was in the last slide, or it might be a metaphor for the way that you're seeing yourself as a future teacher. When they first arrive, we give them a workbook. So the Pebble Pad space is very flexible. It goes from having templates that you can just use ready-made to being very open, and you can design your own pages yourself. Or in our case, what we've done is we've created a workbook. So this is where the academics or the teachers can actually create their own template inside the Pebble Pad space that will get the students to do what you want them to do. So a workbook has been created, and you can see along the top there the links that have got those words, the non-academic capabilities, and we get them to think about what they've brought to university, what motivated them to become a teacher, and they can write about that. How would they think about their communication skills right at this particular point in time? Would you like to do this little quiz that's online, and then reflect on the outcomes of that? So this workbook, which goes through those 7 non-academic capabilities, gets them used to the Pebble Pad space, so that they're used to using all of the things that are in Pebble Pad, and it's not something frightening to them. The Pebble Pad space is quite easy to navigate. So this just gives them, we guide them through. You can see there that we've got a page on, how to upload an image and how to change the banner, because the picture banner at the top there is the default. PebblePad one. So of course we want students to be able to personalize and make the pages more about themselves and what they're talking about on the pages. So that's the very first thing they do, is to do this workbook that we've created, where they can start using the space. And then we get them to think about, in the second session, when they've started to get a little bit more academic thought going in their head, then we ask them to find the image and think about their future as a teacher. So here, this is a bit more flexible. This is a page that a first year student has created. She's changed the banner to be something more applicable to early childhood. She's got a nice picture of herself, and she started to talk about her teaching philosophy. And the bottom of the page has her picture that she's chosen to talk about, as far as using symbols or a metaphor for what she thinks her future role as a teacher will be. So it's just the beginning. You know, what do I think in the beginning? Then as we go into the second, third and fourth years of the degree, we have to help the students collect and collate evidence about achieving those professional standards. So PebblePad has some templates. As I said, we use things as simply as possible. The template is called an achievement. So in order to achieve this professional standard, they fill out this form. So this student has changed the banner to be a Wordle, and the standard is about assessment, so it's quite appropriate. The biggest word is assessment. The first box that they can write in the template gives them an opportunity to describe the context of where they achieved that standard, and then they can start talking about the evidence that proves to the reader that they have actually achieved the standard. And as you go down the template, there's a box that you can see has a little green tick, when the student first opens that template, that's red, so they're like traffic lights. The red says there's nothing here, you haven't got any evidence attached. And when you start attaching evidence, it goes to yellow, and when you explain and put in context the evidence, then it goes to green. And so it's very good for an assessor to go in and see that, you know, the evidence has already been linked to that. And then there's a space for reflection, and this is something that PebblePad is really great about, that in every single document that they get you to do that's a template, they ask you to think about, well, what did you learn from that? You know, what did you learn from writing about the achievement? What did you learn from actually achieving that standard? You know, how has it changed your practice as a future teacher? So the students collect these. Here's another one. Here the student has put their own image in the banner, so that makes it even more personal, because it's about the professional experience that they were engaged in at that particular time. And you can see that they've started to talk about the context of achieving that standard. Now that, you know, with 7 standards, that could be quite messy and quite, you know, like it could be all over the place when we think about, you know, online portfolios, that, you know, we don't really want 7 or more of those pages for, you know, a prospective employer to have to wade their way through. So PebblePad have a great thing. It was great when they invented this. It's called a collection. So what it is just a page where you can collect a number of certain items around a particular, you know, it could be around one topic, but in our case, it's about the standards. And you can see here that as soon as they start to get more than one, we ask them to add in those singular templates onto this page, this collection of their standards. So that means it's just one page that an employer might look at, and they've got a pet standard, they might just look at that one. Or if they've got a couple that are their pets that they really want to make sure that this prospective employee, you know, has really covered those standards, they can look at those ones in particular. So that's how we get them to start collecting that evidence of the standards throughout their degree. And then in the 4th year, they have to put it together for us. So 4th year, of course, is when they're just about teachers. And this image is of the first page of an almost graduate teacher. So I'll talk backwards about it. We get them to create it backwards, but this is the first page that an employer, a prospective employer, might see. And there's a nice little banner. There's something about technology in that. It's a pebble pad banner. The student has a video, so we get them to make a little 1-minute video. And here are their images. So this student's put their first year image that they chose to be a metaphor for how they saw themselves as a future teacher. They've talked about the evolution of humans being, a metaphor for how she saw herself evolving as a teacher. And then this is the image that that she's chosen at the end. And I really like this. I'll have to get down closer to read this. But the last sentence is, I now truly recognise the importance of a teacher's role in a student's life and futures, and will now focus on that rather than focusing on how the journey will benefit myself. So, that beautiful recognition of the 4 years actually, changing her attitude towards the profession of teaching. So this just shows you the structure. So we've tried to streamline it. We're trying not to make the students' work onerous, just that they have to prove these particular points in order to prove they're employable, both to the accrediting bodies, but also to prospective employers. So here you can see the structure of the ePortfolio. The navigation is along the top. The introduction was that page we just looked at, and then there's a page for the non-academic skills, and then there's the page that lists the templates that they've got added in for their professional standards. So the non-academic skills page goes back to those 7 criteria that are meant to be professional skills, and this page that the students create blows my mind. They write such wonderful things here, and they put photographs of people that have been their mentors, that they write about places in the degree where they had those huge aha moments, about learning theories that really are fundamental to their teaching. This is the page where they really get to talk about all of those things about teaching. It isn't just teaching maths or teaching English, not the content. And this is a beautiful page. So we get them to create that. Well, they've got their professional standards page, then we get them to do this page, and then we get them to do the front page, which is the 2 images, talking about the first year image and the 4th year image. And they've got all of that stuff in their mind about how fabulous they are. And then we ask them to make the Me in a Moment video, which is just 1 minute. That's all to make a pitch to an employer that makes them see that they're different to any other possible employee. So I'm going to I hope I'm going to be able to play you, I'll just play you one. And we may get a little bit of a kerfuffle with noise here, but let's see if it works.
Hi, my name's Casey Stora, and I will be graduating from a Bachelor of Education in Early Childhood and Primary at the end of this year. While I was at Sturt University, I participated in the Future Moves program. We would go around to local Riverina schools and talk to underprivileged students in high school specifically to talk about university as an option for them once they complete their studies, and how they would go about getting into university. I also completed my final practicum at a regional and remote school in Western Queensland that had an Indigenous population of approximately 80%. That really ignited a passion in me for working with Indigenous students into the future. That school was made a possibility for me by participating in the Teacher Education Centre of Excellence in Townsville, which I applied for separate from my university studies, that I will graduate with at the end of this year.
Great. So I hope that I might just start this one and stop it and see if I can.
My name's Erica Wright.
Hi, my name's
last 5
Casey
years.
No. Oh, good. Stopped. They didn't work like they do in PowerPoint inside of the Adobe Connect space. So that's, I've described the embedded ePortfolio as it is now, and just in the last few slides are examples of other things that our students have written. And I guess I just wanted to re-emphasize that the process of collecting all that evidence about themselves, you know, so many different skills that they have to learn, self-learn in a way, because we do scaffold them through the making of all of these things, but you know, they have to put it together in the end. And it's just delightful to read the sorts of understanding they have about themselves as pre-service teachers about to become graduate teachers. You know, and the kind of images that they use, like I find this one such a beautiful image, and that such a prospective attitude towards, you know, becoming a professional educator. And here's another one where, you know, the student only wrote a small amount in the first year about being open-minded, but when it came to their final year, they had plenty to say, and plenty of thought went into, you know, the fact that they found, you know, waves being a better metaphor for how they were about to be a new teacher. So I think that I will be able to share the slides. I hope so. Anyway, I don't have a lot of references, but I mean, you can see here that the two, the top and tail, as I said, are back in 2006 and 2007, because the stuff that goes into an ePortfolio, even though it's becoming more complex, is still kind of the same. The technology is you know, rolling on really fast, but what an ePortfolio can be is a number of different things, and we have been talking about it for a long time and developing that. And the other three articles are ones that I've written with colleagues specifically on the undergraduate degree and the use of visual image. So my colleague Jennifer Rowley at Sydney University and Patsy Polly at University of New South Wales have been very instrumental in my thinking around ePortfolio. And then here's my contact details. I don't know that anyone in the room will want to ring me, but someone might want to email me, which would be fantastic. That would be really wonderful.
Thank you, Jenny. That was very interesting. And now we have some time for questions or comments, and you can either open your microphone and ask a question, or write your question or comment to the chat box, whatever works best for you. I wonder how the student teachers, how they see this ePortfolio work they are doing. How, do you think that they value the work?
I think that will be more valuable with the new structure. In the old course, I mean, all students, I think, you know, they get to know more about themselves as they create the ePortfolio. So yes, I think that they do value it from that point of view. I know that in the past, some of them actually have already got a job when they're told they need to put together this final ePortfolio. And so for the very few, it has been a bit of a nuisance because they've already got a job. But they do take the point that this is, as I said, just a point in time. They're going to need to make another folio of evidence of their ability to teach when they're teachers after a number of years. But where it sits in the degree program now is really very fortunate. They need to create this professional ePortfolio, or the showcase ePortfolio, in the first session of fourth year, when they're on their second last professional experience. So that will be really good, because they'll have put all of that material together. They'll already have evidence of their 7 professional standards, and they're going out onto their final placement with this beautiful ePortfolio that they can show to everybody that they come across. And when they're creating it, after they've had it seen by an academic at the university, we encourage them to share it with all of their previous supervising teachers, all of their previous principals at the schools or centres that they've, or directors where they've had their previous placements. So that, I mean, those people are in the best position to know when there's new positions coming up. So if they share their ePortfolio broadly to the other people that have been involved in their professional experience, then they've got the best chance of being employed, I think.
So any comments or questions? Yes, please, David.
So I was wondering about. Firstly, thank you for a very good presentation. I found it very interesting. And I was wondering because you showed me a sketch over the structure of the teacher program. So I was wondering whether the students are working with this portfolio in all the subjects with different university teachers throughout the entire course of studying at the university. And do they get like classroom time for working with this, or is it something they are working with on their own time?
A bit of both. So this is the structure of the degree program, and the ePortfolio is just in the far left column, the professional experience. So students have only a small amount of time with an academic in that subject or course, because most of the time they go out and spend in schools or centres doing their professional experience. So the amount of learning time, university time has been reduced markedly in those subjects. And so we tend to ask students to, they can learn in the online space. We have online learning modules to scaffold them through the process of what they need to do for each of the elements of the ePortfolio. And then it's up to them to collect the evidence, and they submit it, and the university teacher looks at it in the online space and gives some comments. And yes, it can be different lecturers. And it was funny, as I thought a bit about this presentation, when you look at that structure of the degree program, it's quite possible that, people who are teaching the ones that are in blue or purple have no idea that the students create an ePortfolio, because it's, one stream, the employability stream, and, only certain lecturers teach those particular subjects. I do try to get the word out that, yes, in this degree program we have an embedded ePortfolio, but, you can only send that message so far. The students need to be responsible. They collect their material year by year, and it's written very clearly in assessment tasks what they need to do. And then, as I said, we have online learning modules that they can go back to and work through that tell them what is required for each element of the ePortfolio. I hope that helps. And Alison says, love how you've used visual images. Yes, it was interesting, Alison, that and I hope that you get a chance to read the article that Patsy and Jennifer and I wrote, because what we did at an ePortfolio forum was a little experiment. We got the people who came to our workshop to do these exercises of taking an object and taking a photograph of it, and then thinking about how that object might say something about themselves. So it just actually gives you, sometimes when you want to say something about yourself, you can't think of the right words to describe an ability you have or a skill, and it just allows them to have something to talk through, to say, this image, I think, will tell you a bit of a story about me. So in the one, you know, I didn't stop and pay much attention to it, but these examples near the end, this student created this image in their first year. So they actually put together this little collage. And, you know, I mean, the thought that has to go into that to, you know, what do I want to say about myself? Well, I think, you know, a good metaphor for me wanting to be a teacher is the sun shining down and watering this plant. So it just does give them something to hook their writing or explanation on. Is the portfolio itself assessed, or is it a combination of other previously assessed tasks? It is a it's a satisfactory, unsatisfactory item. So the professional experiences don't get graded. So it's been quite a while since students have gone off on professional experience, and the supervising teacher has said, yes, you get a pass and you get a high distinction. They have to achieve what they're supposed to achieve when they do their professional experience. And along with that is the ePortfolio requirement. So they need to do it and submit it. And the academic will say whether it's convincing, they've got the evidence or not. If it isn't finished, then they have to, you know, do a bit more work on it. So, but in the end, so what happens in the end is that, I mean, I don't know if you ever write something about yourself. You know, when I'm working on my CV, I quite like doing that because I'm putting together the evidence of my experiences, and this is what happens to these students. They start to put together this lovely looking, convincing argument about themselves, and they get quite attached. And the final one, students do put quite a bit of work into because they can see it's about themselves and it's going to make a good argument for them to be employable. Thanks. Is that David Smith saying that? Good on you, David. I'm glad you were there. You should have popped up and said something about all of those things about the powers that be that are making us, you know, twist ourselves in knots to get our teachers out there as graduate teachers. So I'll just read out what David wrote. He said, part of the reason for that grading is that the final school report comes from the classroom teacher, so that it would be unfair to apply grading from HD to F. And you can imagine how, you know, it's not relative, is it? You know, one teacher may think that this particular student's done a fabulous job, when another teacher might think, oh, gee, they're just scraping through. So it is unfair to expect the supervising teacher to provide a grade. And thank you for that, David. That was really helpful. I'm also, so you saw my email address. I'm also very willing to respond to any thoughts or questions that come up afterwards. I think that the value of the ePortfolio, you know, we never seem to be able to explain enough about it. It's, you know, the skills are almost to the point where it's hard to define them and always explain about them. But the product of the ePortfolio is always incredibly impressive. And I think the students themselves become very impressed with the work they've done.
David, would you like to say something? Just open your microphone.
So Jenny, just in relation to your point about the use of ePortfolio across all the subjects, you might want to say something about this is it's only just been recently that we've got the ePortfolio embedded in all the EPT subjects, and it's really the structure of our university that a course director looks after the degree, not the school itself. So it's all about different institutions have different structures, but it's actually a win to have the ePortfolio embedded in all the EPT subjects.
Absolutely. And as I said, I hope I said, that when the commitment was made to the combined early childhood and primary degree, the designers, so the group that got together to design the first iteration of that degree, did commit to an ePortfolio, but it has been a struggle. I mean, it really David's quite right. It's only possibly in the last 4 years that we've successfully managed to get it into every single year level of the degree. So with the reviews and the changes, and so that has been a bit less than satisfactory. So it's very nice to be able to say that now in the past 4 to 5 years, what the students create at the end is actually at the end of a sequence of collection and archiving and arguing that they've achieved all of the standards.
Yes, it takes time to develop these kind of things and get them up and running and go through the different phases of developing things.
And David's quite right that without a person responsible for a course, so that 2020 model has just I think been going. It's just going through the accreditation now, but the commitment has stayed there that the ePortfolio would be there, but it has been through the other iterations of it. We've had to struggle to kind of keep it going, but the commitment by a particular course director that this is going to be good for the student, the graduate teacher, that's been great. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. And then one last question from Graham in the chat box about the philosophical foundation in the portfolio.
Yes, we scaffold all elements of the ePortfolio. So the students know that they have to do something. It's written as an assessment task, but then we have learning modules that will take them through the thinking process. And the first, you can see that some of them are a bit lean in the first year, but as they go through the years, and particularly in the showcase ePortfolio, there are key questions that we ask them to reflect on and use in the writing of their philosophy. But the images really help them so much to be able to describe the changes and the development in their learning and understanding.
Thank you, Jenny, once more, and I hope that we can also have your slides so that we can upload them to our website as well. And then if your colleagues were not able to join this live session, the recording will be available, I think, tomorrow, or how much time Janette needs to make it a YouTube video. But thank you very much and have a good night's sleep or good day's work, whatever is ahead of you. Bye-bye.
Yes, back to our isolation. Yeah. Thanks very much to you.
Thank you.